Everyone likes reading witty quotes of famous people. Let's read them together. I assembled a short list of quotes which I really like. Quotes that are useful, quotes that are funny, and quotes that allow me to tell you a story of sorts. Because, sometimes the quotes are given out of context. Sometimes they are heavily altered, attributed to a wrong person, or just entirely made up. Some clarifications might be really handy. I tried to limit myself with no more than one quote from the same philosopher. Otherwise, I could just give you a list of quotes of Diogenes of Sinope. They're hilarious, and it is very easy to prepare this kind of video. You just copy and paste the quotes from the lives of eminent philosophers by Diogenes Laertius, and that's it. Well, I'm gonna copy and paste some stuff from Diogenes Laertius anyway. As I've mentioned already, many of the quotes on this list are quite useful. So there's a dimension of practical application. And I actually use some of these quotes every now and then. It helps me to look smarter than I really am. In fact, I don't really have any ideas of my own, but if you're well read, you can successfully camouflage this fact. I've been doing this for years, trust me, it works. But if you don't have time to read books, you can always go straight to the selections of quotes of famous people. A very effective approach. I also tried to exclude quotes that are too obvious, too popular. If you use them, people think that you're not really smart at all, because the quotes are quite banal. So no quotes like, all I know is that I know nothing. That's a good quote. It describes the philosophical approach to the subject, any subject. But just don't use it. Very trivial. Or, for example, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, which is attributed to Plato by the internet. But it is not Plato. But a nice quote nonetheless, although it is frequently misunderstood. What it actually means is that, well, beholders are creatures from Dungeons and Dragons. A beholder has one giant eye, and therein lies the beauty. Okay, let's start with one of my personal favorites. The quote I use quite a lot since it is applicable to pretty much everything. If a man does not know to which port he is sailing, no wind is favorable to him. Seneca. Obviously, there are other translations of this line from the moral letters, but I'm gonna stick to this version. It is an absolutely brilliant quote that tries to convey a quite simple and obvious message that doesn't require any explanation. Unless you're a person who watches YouTube videos about the quotes of famous philosophers. Okay, but there's one interesting thing about this quote. Seneca was a Stoic. Stoicism is all about determinism. Stoics are fatalists. Everything that happens is meant to happen. All you have is a moral choice. Then it gets complicated, but yeah. So if you know this aspect of Stoicism, this quote about favorable wind suddenly gets more depth, because it is not only about your direction, so to speak, but also about your perception. Mostly about your perception. Let's go to the next quote. May the children of your enemies live in luxury. Antisthenes. Sounds fantastic. You can shock people by using this quote. Antisthenes was the original cynic, or a proto-cynic, the teacher of Diogenes. That's where Diogenes got his ideas about pretty much everything. Like many ancient philosophers, he thought that luxury is something that has to be avoided and something that, in fact, is an obstacle to becoming a truly wise person. You become soft. Antisthenes also said that I'd rather be mad than feel pleasure. So, as you can see, he was quite serious about this. Obviously, someone like the above-mentioned Seneca had a slightly different opinion on this. He said that wealth is the slave of the wise and the master of the fool, which is also a good and a deep quote. As you might guess, Seneca was a very wealthy man. In fact, at some point, he was one of the richest people in the Roman Empire. So that explains a lot. And Antisthenes, well, in Xenophon's symposium, he was very proud of his wealth as well. Because, you know, he had enough money for everything he ever wanted. And so he could spend all of his free time learning philosophy from Socrates. The trick here is that he could adjust his desires. He just never needed anything material except for some very simple food or very simple clothes on his back. So he could be quite wealthy without any money at all. Let's move to his student, Diogenes of Sinope. He was asking alms of a bad-tempered man, who said, "Yes, if you can persuade me." "If I could have persuaded you," said Diogenes, "I would have persuaded you to hang yourself." That's Diogenes being Diogenes. Beautiful quote. Every time somebody says, "You have to persuade me," I just can't help myself. I just go, if I could have persuaded you, I would have persuaded you to hang yourself. I never miss the opportunity to use this line. I'm not sure that this line has some deeper meaning, although I can easily imagine one. Something like, you cannot really persuade a person if they don't want to be persuaded, or they don't have an inclination to be persuaded, or listen to the voice of reason. That's a good explanation. But I think that Diogenes just wanted to be mean. Some people apparently liked it. And this mean, wandering bum even had students. The most famous was Crates of Thebes. We should study philosophy to the point when we see no difference between generals and donkey drivers. Crates of Thebes. There are obviously other translations of this phrase as well, including a man ought to study philosophy up to the point of looking on generals and donkey drivers in the same light. There are also different ways to interpret this quote. My favorite is that there is actually no difference between generals and donkey drivers. But you have to be Crates to fully understand this. We can't be even sure that he understood it himself. Because, you know, he said that we should study philosophy up to this point, but apparently he kept studying philosophy for the rest of his life. Which kind of implies that to some extent he kept seeing the difference between generals, or leaders, or strategoi, and, you know, donkey drivers. Let's read some more quotes and unreliable anecdotes from the lives and opinions of eminent philosophers. We are told that he was once chastising a slave for stealing, and when the latter pleaded that it was his fate to steal, "Yes, and to be beaten too," said Zeno. So, the slave in this anecdote apparently knew a couple of things about the philosophy of Stoicism, or more precisely, about the philosophy of the founder of the Stoic school. And he used this knowledge of determinism and its role in the system of Zeno's thought against his master. Some people think that ancient Stoics had no sense of humor. As you can see, this is simply not true. And actually, according to the legend, Chrysippus, the second founder of the Stoic school, even died of laughter. Yeah, he made a stupid joke and then started to laugh so hard at his own joke, I should say, that he had a stroke. If you kiss your child or your wife, say that you only kiss things which are human, and thus you will not be disturbed if either of them dies. Epictetus, or Arian. Here's another Stoic comedian who knew how to lighten the mood. Try and guess if he had children or a wife. Well, actually, he did, when he was very old, and somebody essentially left a baby on his doorstep. So he had to take care of him and had to find someone who will help with taking care of the baby. But previously, his students were making fun of Epictetus, because like any Stoic, he liked to talk about the importance of family and children. But he lived like a cynic and completely ignored this Stoic imperative of get married and start making babies. Epictetus, or Arian, that's a long story, is actually one of the most aphoristic Stoic philosophers. You can easily disassemble his works into hundreds of quotes, and all of them will be reasonably deep. He also made jokes, Stoic jokes. I'm pretty sure many people will interpret this isolated quote about death of your loved ones as this modern pseudo-Buddhist and quite narcissistic don't get attached to anything. Just swipe your Tinder and if somebody gets pregnant, run. Well, Epictetus is deeper than that. And he wasn't a good runner, to be honest. He was limping for the most of his life, since his leg was broken by his master, back when he was a teenager, probably, and a slave. So he has lived with this injury ever since. And then he was exiled from Rome. He knew quite well that life can be brutal. So he adopted a mindset that it is not brutal at all. And he taught this so that people could escape being crushed by the weight of the world. Kind of. Most of his ideas of the Stoics, revolve around the concept that it is your perception or your judgments about the things that hurt you, not the things themselves. And about things you can control and things you cannot, which is a logical and self-evident idea. These days, it is quite popular not only with philosophically inclined people who read Marcus Aurelius and Plato, but also with pseudo-spiritual people who have no friends and live with 10 cats. Speaking of Marcus Aurelius, it is possible to live well in a palace. Marcus Aurelius. It is possible indeed. There are different translations of this phrase. The full quote goes something like this. Where a man can live, there he can also live well. But he must live in a palace. Well, then, he can also live well in a palace. Marcus can be disassembled into nice inspirational quotes as well. You can print them on t-shirts and sell them online. I chose this one mainly because it sounds weird to the people who don't understand the context. Also, it is true. As I've said, it is actually possible to live well in a palace. Now, let's get back to your friend and my best friend, Antisthenes, and this long tradition of ancient cynics and stoics, who saw luxury as a certain hindrance to philosophical life, the best life possible. This is what Marcus is talking about. And he knew something about palaces, uh, which actually makes this quote very amusing. Marcus Aurelius was not only the emperor of Rome and later the god emperor of mankind. He was also the emperor of self-restraint. There are lots of quotes of Stoics on this list. Let's try something different. Let's try Epicurus. Just kidding, Epicurus. Any man can make mistakes, but only an idiot persists in his error. Cicero. This is a very famous quote, actually. And there are different translations, including any man is liable to a mistake, but no one but a downright fool will persist in error, which is slightly longer, but a bit more faithful to the Latin original. It is believed that this is a reworked and updated version of the famous Errare Humanum Est by Seneca the Elder, father of Seneca the Younger, a Stoic philosopher. You might think that Cicero was talking about Epicurus, but no, he was on a different subject. I can't say that this quote is especially wise, but it is true. And you can use it to insult people in a smart way, effectively, and you're quoting Cicero. Everyone will know you're a man of culture. But the hardest thing of all to bear, Socrates, is to see you put to death unjustly. Whereupon Socrates, it is said, gently stroked the young man's head. Would you have been better pleased, my dear one, to see me put to death for some just reason, rather than unjustly? As you know, Socrates was accused of all sorts of things and sentenced to death in one of the most infamous trials in the history of human civilization. The citizens of Athens were cursed for all eternity, and Socrates became quite probably the biggest name in philosophy after our God, Lord, and Savior Plato. This is the quote from Xenophon's account on the trial. And quite probably it was made up by Xenophon. Socrates is largely a legendary figure that was transformed into a fictional character. So when we're talking about the quotes of Socrates, we're mostly talking about either Plato or Xenophon putting words in his mouth. Which might be true for some other philosophers as well, including Epictetus. And that is something you always have to keep in mind. Sometimes we're talking about brilliant ideas and witty remarks of characters from the works of fiction. And the quotes should be attributed to somebody else. Xenophon, Plato, Arian. But this is powerful and funny quote, anyway, and obviously very useful. Now you live there your own life, but I will live that of Pythagoras, Apollonius of Tyana, or Flavius Philostratus. This is what Apollonius told his old teacher. He actually liked him a lot, to an extent that he persuaded his father, a quite wealthy man, to present his teacher with a villa. But his approach to philosophy was slightly different, so he became essentially some sort of a cynic, a wandering sage. I mean, in the unlikely case, if Apollonius of Tyana actually existed, and not a fictional character invented by Flavius Philostratus. I will make a video about Apollonius quite soon. But this is a nice quote, a great response to all this "be yourself" or live your own life. Yeah, it is all fine and understandable, but let's be honest, in some cases, it is better to live the life of Pythagoras than to keep living your own quite pathetic and pointless little life. Thank you for watching. I will probably make more videos with nice and supposedly inspiring quotes. So don't forget to turn on the notifications. Or alternatively, to turn the notifications off if you absolutely hate my videos. See you soon. Probably. If it's meant to be. It is not entirely under my control. Ask Epictetus, he knows all about it.